Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray, your 10-minute weekly fix of ancient warfare related rant by me. Of course, I answer questions from viewers, commenters, listeners in this segment. So you, of course, can ask us a question. You can send us an email at awa@caravansaraipublishers.com. You can comment on one of the videos or one of the other platforms that you're listening or watching. You can send us a postcard, PO Box 222 Belfield, NSW2191 Australia. That will get to us. Three pieces of evidence there. And of course, you can back us on Patreon. We have lots of questions from patrons. So there's three different levels that you can back us on Patreon. There is Legionary, Optio, and Centurion, $1, $5, and $10 a piece, and even get a copy of the magazine digitally or in print. Now, today, serendipitously, I have essentially three questions, which are the same question, and a question I'm really looking forward to answering. And I might have mentioned it before, so hopefully those of you who've listened along might have heard me mention some of what I'm about to say, but perhaps not so concentratedly, shall we say. So the first is from Floody77. Hi, Murray. I was wondering who your favorite ancient general was and why. Thank you, Floody. Uchale, who do you think is one of the most underrepresented generals of ancient times in popular media compared to how important they were in their time? Any book or recommendations to read more about him? Thank you, Uchale. And from Caleb, one of the patrons. Yes, patrons. If an autobiography of an ancient general could be discovered, who would you want it to be written about? Why? And what is already known about them? So I'm going to put those three together, and I'm going to answer this question all about my favorite ancient general that no one seems to have heard of, Sextus Julius Frontinus. Now, a bit of background. I wrote my second master's thesis on Frontinus way back in 1997. So he's a bit of a favorite, always has been for the last, hate to think, almost 30 years. And Frontinus is a fascinating figure because he appears in Roman history on the 1st of January 70 AD as the Praetor Urbanus. We don't know anything about him, and there's been no evidence found prior to that time. More of that a minute. He then goes on to be a governor of Britain in 73 to 77 before Agricola. He's then the governor of Germany and Feria in the early 80s. He then is the proconsul of Asia in 86 AD before retiring, and then he comes out of retirement under the reign of Nerva, where he's consul again for the second time, and then he's the curator of aqueducts, among some other things. And then in 100 AD, he is the consul for the third time, shared with Trajan, which is essentially almost all we know about his career. Now, in addition to that, of course, in his writings, we've got the De Aquis Urbi, which is the book on aqueducts, which makes him very important and famous in aqueduct studies and people who are studying Roman hydraulics and Roman water systems. Of course, he wrote the Stratagems, which survive, which is something that's generally plundered for historical anecdotes, but of course, I think is part of a much larger genre of literature, which was intended to be practical, to teach the rules of generalship. He's also got some writings in the field of Roman land surveying, which very few people read. But anyway, those are his writings. We have a couple of other references to him in Aelian, who talks about visiting Frontinus before he wrote his Tactica. Pliny mentions him, as does Martial. So in that sense, you've got a figure who is active politically in a really interesting period of time in the Roman Empire, because he's active from the reigns of Vespasian, Titus. We don't know of anything for him under Titus, but he's active in the reigns of Vespasian, then Domitian, then Nerva, then Trajan. And if he's the Praetor Urbanus in 70 AD, he's consul in 72. So he's already into his late 30s, maybe even early 40s. So he must have had a career prior to that period of time where he proves himself. And so you're stretching back his career through the reign of Nero and into the reign of Claudius. And so one of the fascinating things about his career is that it seems to be uninterrupted, no matter who he served under, whether it be Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Domitian. And then, of course, he comes out of retirement without a blemish on his reputation under Nerva and Trajan. And so he serves for that second, well, the last 3 quarters of the 1st century AD, and is remarkably successful. His career in Tacitus is summarized in a single sentence, that he conquers the Silures in Wales and Britain and rises as great or as high as a man could then rise. But I think reading between the lines and extrapolating some other aspects of his career, what it seems to be is that he must have served at some point in the East under probably under Domitius Corbulo. He has stratagems of Corbulo in his contemporary stratagems, and there's only 12 contemporary stratagems in his book, which is remarkable and argues that they represent something. There's some Domitius Corbulo stratagems, there's a Vespasian stratagem, and there's 4 stratagems of Domitian. So that makes me think that he must have served with Domitius Corbulo in the East, fighting against the Parthians. He somehow proves himself to Vespasian, so therefore he's probably fighting in Judea under Vespasian and Titus. He's dispatched to Italy with Mucianus in 69 AD, allowing him to be in Rome to take office on January 1st, which is the first thing we know about his career. So he must have had a remarkable career up to that point. Probably he'd already been a quaestor, must have been a quaestor at some point. We don't know when. And he may have already been a military tribune in command of a legion after his quaestorship. That's possibly how he proves himself to Vespasian, because what seems to happen as soon as he's Praetor Urbanus, he steps aside for Domitian to take that office. And soon after, in 70, he's commanding a legion in the suppression of the Civilis revolt. And so that's always been argued as to, well, which legion is it? I think it's to Audutrix, which he takes with in a company with Domitian to the north. And thereafter, that legion goes to Britain. Now, one of the things about Flavian governors is that all of them had had experience as a military commander in the province of which they later became governor. So Agricola, Petilius Cerealis, and lots of others. So if that's Frontinus, him being the commander of that legion, going to Britain under Cerealis, succeeding Cerealis as governor, makes a lot of sense for him to have gained that experience there. So he's got that experience. He then commands in Britain for 4 years. It's a very complicated issue in terms of what does he achieve in Britain, because Tacitus gives him 1 sentence. And of course, Tacitus's point is to concentrate on the achievements of Agricola. But it's possible that Frontinus is responsible for the foundations not only of Caerleon in the area of the Silures in South Wales, but possibly also of Chester and York, sometimes given to Agricola, sometimes given to Cerealis. So probably Frontinus is in there as well. So that's remarkable in itself. He then disappears for a few years, and when we find him again, he's governor of Germany from 82 to 84, fighting the war against the Chatti for Domitian. Now, for a long time, that was only assumed because he writes 4 stratagems about that war. But in 2002, I think it was, a diploma was discovered which names him as governor of Germany. So he's absolutely smack bang in the middle of that. Annoyingly, Ronald Syme in 1958 said one day they'll find evidence that he was the governor of Germany, and we have only 50 years after Syme wrote. Ridiculous. So that's amazing. I think he also has an advisory role, if nothing else, in the Dacian campaign of Domitian. And then he goes to Asia. I think he goes to Asia to deal with a military crisis. One of the false Neros is arising in Asia at just that moment. He then retires. But even if that was the end of his career, he's been involved in many of the most important wars in the 1st century AD. He's been involved in the year of 69. He was involved in the Parthian War. He's involved in Britain. He's involved in the German wars, maybe even in Dacia. That's, 5 massive campaigns that are a big part of the military history of the 1st century AD. I also think when he comes back from retirement under Nerva and Trajan, they honor him very highly. So his 2nd consulship is held with Nerva. That's a remarkable honor. And even higher is the fact that his 3rd consulship is held with Trajan as ordinary consul as well. You cannot fathom how high that honor is. Possibly, I think, because they owe Frontinus some kind of debt in acceding to power. And that's completely read between the lines, probably too far. But as I've said in other podcasts like this, if you don't speculate too far, you don't know how far is too far. But I don't think that's even too far. So for me, he's the most remarkable general, and his career is massively overlooked and underrepresented in modern books and media. I think I've explained why I think he's so amazing. And if an autobiography of his, he wouldn't have written one, could be discovered, it would be about him. Recommendations. So my master's thesis is actually online somewhere. If you search for Frontinus Muray Dam, you'll find it. There's also a book that got published last year by John Granger on Frontinus, which was lovely to see. A little bit, some of his research is a little bit out of date. He hasn't read the most recent findings, so that's annoying, but that's okay. There's room for more. I did actually propose writing one about 20 years and got told that it was too obscure, but hopefully we're in an age when that's not the case. Anyway, that's my most favorite general. Thank you all for asking, and I look forward to joining you on the next Ancient Warfare Answers. Thanks. Bye.